The Rippaverse takes us into an event that took place years before the first ISOM adventure. And let me tell you, you are in for an excellent thrill ride. Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Berry. Welcome to the StudioJake vidcast where I talk about all things pop culture. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and if you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member. Okay, so today I will be talking about the Great War of Separation, Part 1. This is the first in a mini-series or limited series from the Rippaverse that establishes the sort of alternate history that the Rippaverse and its founder, Eric July, is bringing as part of the Rippaverse lore. Like in previous reviews of the Rippaverse, I'm going to read what I wrote on my website, StudioJakeMedia.com, and then expound on those ideas. Taking place before the events of ISOM, the Rippaverse gives us a look into the past with The Great War of Separation Issue 1. The story is written by Chuck Dixon and drawn by Jack Herbert, based on an early concept by company founder Eric July. After a group of coyotes slay Texas National Guardsmen at the southern border, a group of their friends get revenge with a strike back. The United States demands that Texas stand down, but as the violence increases, Governor Plessy Sanders decides that it is time to make a stand for the Lone Star State. As a showdown seems inevitable, U.S. Army officer Brian Solari returns to his home state, ready to make a plan. This is a bold step for the Rippaverse. When writing about a conflict, especially within the United States, you have to balance the politics and the action. Dixon, who has written for G.I. Joe and Star Wars, was the perfect person for this. His unique storytelling style sets us up and stuck the landing, getting us ready for the next part. Likewise, Herbert did an excellent job with the artwork. He brought the action sequences and characters to life in a very bold way. It complemented the plot and pulled you into the events that were on the pages. I do think Solari, the future leader of Alpha Corps, was introduced a bit late in the story, but outside of that, it was thrilling. It has the right balance of show and tell, so you do not get lost in the dialogue, but is not purely driven by adrenaline. Dixon nailed it, and I cannot wait to see the next part. So yeah, that is my review of the Great War of Separation. I am so excited to see where this comic book is going to take us into the early days of the Rippaverse. When deciding what cover to choose from, and I'm going to put a larger version of it here on the screen for you, I ultimately went with cover D. They had a lot of really cool ones, I have to admit. They were all very nice, and it was very difficult for me to decide. I ultimately went with cover D, which was done by Wagner Reese. It was a fantastic cover, as you can see here, and on the screen, it is a statue of what appears to be a Texas Ranger. He's on a horse, and he's carrying the Texas state flag in front of the Capitol in Austin, Texas, and you can see a group of people surrounding it and cheering. And that about sums up the story as well. It really grips you. It is very exciting. I had so much fun reading it. Like I said, whenever I approach stories about conflicts within the United States, I always get a little hesitant. Is it going to be heavy-handed in its politics? Is it going to kind of drown you in bureaucracy like some of the Gundam TV shows do? Not here at all. Here, it definitely has a really good balance of what is going on with all the political players, but also focuses on just establishing that baseline lore that is important. So in this world, the United States is divided up into 5 nations, and it hints that there was a conflict prior to the events of the Great War of Separation, which follows Texas, and that there was another break off in the West, but I'm going to let you read so you can find out more of that. But this was a very solid story. Chuck Dixon is one of my all-time favorite writers. He wrote some of my favorite storylines in Batman, as well as Batman comic book spinoffs. He wrote Conan the Barbarian. He wrote G.I. Joe. He wrote The Punisher, and now he is with the Rippaverse, and I'm so excited for that. His version of Batman and the Joker really defined how I see those two characters. So to see him come to one of my favorite indie comic book publishers, that just makes it all the more exciting. And he does a fantastic job with The Great War of Separation. Chuck Dixon is a brilliant writer, and it definitely shows in this Rippaverse release. And likewise, Jack Herbert, he is a fantastic artist. I really, really like how he made the colors pop. I'll show you an example of it here. Just give me 1 second. It's difficult to choose a spot. So here's a scene early on in the comics, so I don't give away spoilers, where some cartel members attack some Texas National Guardsmen and there's an explosion. Look at the detail in that. Look at the shading. It is so incredibly impressive with how he draws it, how he designs it. I really, really like this. I cannot wait for part 2. I think it's going to just expand even more. And like I said, my one critique of it is I do think Brian Solari was introduced a little late in the story. You kind of see him early on, but it's just sort of a cameo. And then he has like a full introduction later in the story. I would have liked to have seen him a bit earlier just because I know him as the leader of Alpha Corps. And I'm excited to see the role he plays in the Great War of Separation. One of the things that is really interesting is in Isom and Yaira and Bloodruth and Gooding, you hear a lot of talk of Excepts. So Excepts in the Rippaverse are people with extraordinary abilities. And as opposed to, say, Marvel that has mutants and Inhumans and Children of the Vault for some reason, all these different types of what some might call metahumans, at least that's how they're referred to in the DC Comics. Excepts is sort of a catch-all for the Rippaverse. Now, they play an important role in the Isom Ill-Advised story arc and in Alpha Corps and in Yaira. However, they don't really get mentioned a lot in this particular entry into the canon. You don't really hear a lot about Excepts at all in this. So I'm curious how that's going to play whenever the sequel comes out. Is it going to be like this big introduction where they have some sort of super soldier serum where people always had them, but they didn't know how to activate those powers? Will there be some sort of super weapon that goes off or an event that gives people superpowers? I'm very curious to see, because they have said, both Chuck Dixon and Eric July have said, we're going to learn more about Excepts in this limited series. So I'm excited to see how all that plays out. I think it's going to be fantastic, but definitely pick this up. One of the cool things about this one is you don't have to be familiar with Isom or the Alpha Corps to pick it up. Obviously, if you're an Alpha Corps fan, you're going to be excited to see the origin of Brian Solari, but if you're just like, hey, where do I start with this? I always say start with Isom 1, but in this case, if you're just kind of like, hey, I'm just kind of a casual reader, I'm not really ready to commit to buying all the issues of the Rippaverse, this is the one to start you out with, because this establishes the early canon. It's sort of a standalone story. It has familiar characters in it, so you will learn about what's going on in the Rippaverse. You don't have to read all the previous entries. This does a good job of being a standalone story, and kudos to Eric July, who came up for the concept, but also to Chuck Dixon, who wrote the story. I think that this is going to be an excellent limited series, and I can't wait to see where it takes us next. If you like that video, be sure to give it a like, share it out to all your friends, leave me a comment and tell me what you think, and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member. That is the best way to support. But another way is you can head on over to my locals community. You can sign up for a monthly subscription or send my articles tips, and I've got exclusive content there just for you. If you're feeling extra nice today, head on over to my website, StudioJakeMedia.com, and there you will find even more articles on comic books, anime, television, film, music, and so much more. Best of all, it's free. You just sign up with your email address or in the WordPress app. You can also support me by checking out my own novels. Yes, I'm a creator too. I've got Cacophony, A Tale of Faith and Fear, which is a paranormal story. I've got The Seven Royals, All Good Things, which is the start of my Sword and Sorcery trilogy, and I have a sequel to that, which is Breaking the Stars. The trilogy is following a group of your favorite fairy tale characters who are facing a dark army and have to save their homeland. Best of all, book 3, I'm going to have an announcement about it very soon. It'll conclude this trilogy. Last but definitely not least is my fantasy romance novella, Blessed Child. If you like stories about courage under fire and elf princesses and knights who are disgraced but on the path of redemption, this is the story for you. Pick up one or all 4 at Amazon.com. Leave me a 5-star review. It really helps out small indie creators like myself. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.
I've been living life right like I could just die any minute. Going for a ride down the side, PCH, country limit. I don't need a guide, follow lights, take me where I want to visit. Are you alive? Or just breathing? Cause I've been living life right like I could just die any minute. Going for a ride down the side, PCH, country limit. I don't need a guide, follow lights, take me where...
Yes, I know I wore this Rippaverse shirt in a previous review. Don't worry, it's been washed since then.